Hi, I'm Lawrence, and I'm now going to do a video on what you do when you receive your worms if you buy some worms from us or anywhere. So the first thing you need is a small bucket like this, and you need to drill a lot of holes in the bottom. So the holes will be about 3 millimeters each. It's best to use a drill and drill the holes with a metal or wood drill bit. And then once you've got that, you need to fill it with cardboard. So this is then going to be completely filled with ripped up cardboard, and fill it with ripped up paper. Some of it shredded very finely, some bigger and rolled. Maybe like egg cartons are quite good, and also toilet roll, the insides of a toilet roll. And that's because that's their bedding, and they like to have places to hide and lay their eggs. When you do this, you want to make sure you get all the plastic off, and you want to fill it right to the top. Okay, so once you've filled it right to the top, you need to get all the paper nice and wet. Worms can't move through dry stuff. Okay. Then we're going to add compost. The compost is the best food for worms because it doesn't go off, and the flies and things don't lay eggs in it to create maggots. So it's the best food you can get, and you can add as much as you want, and they'll just eat on it over a month. So when you have this shrunken cardboard, it will be about 3/4 full. Then just cover that with compost. So you just have a layer of compost. It can be any compost, but the best is from horse compost. But it should be old. If you imagine a compost pile of manure, it gets hot. And imagine worms in there. They'll die. So what we need to do is use aged manure. I use all types of compost, and this is sheep manure, which has been fermented using effective microorganisms in a biofertilizer. So I'll do another video on that. So we're just covering it a little bit, and then we're going to put on the contents of the delivery. So there'll be 600 worms and some worm castings. Okay? Once we've done that, we can add a little bit more of the compost. And just a tiny bit of food scraps. Just a little bit. Okay, and then always coffee grounds. And some grit, a pinch of mashed up, ground up egg shells. And then we're going to fill it to the top with manure. And then in here will be enough food for these worms for 2 months. So in 2 months, these guys should double in their population. And this will shrink down to about halfway down the bucket. During that time, you can put in some worm feed, okay? And we'll go into what feed we can give them in a minute. You need to store this bucket somewhere that's room temperature. When I used to live in a city, I kept this in my kitchen. If you have a healthy worm farm, there's no flies, no smell, and nothing gets out. We need another bucket, the same size, and this will go in that bucket. Every week, you can take this out, and inside the bottom bucket will be a liquid, and that will be your fertilizer, your worm extract. So you can mix that with water and put it to all your plants. Okay? This one on top, after 2 months, will be you'll need to redo the bedding. Every 2 months you have to redo the bedding. So what you're going to do in 2 months is empty this out and you're not going to use anything from it. You're going to split it in half and create 2 worm farms the same size. Why? Because if you mess one up, you've got another one. After 2 more months, you can think about going to bigger worm farms. So you can check out the other video on different ways to make worm farms. So I recommend always splitting first, because so many people mess up and buy worms again, and we don't want you to do that. Just hedge your bets.
No.
So in the winter I keep these in the greenhouse where it's warm, and in the summer I keep these out in the shade. It also needs to be moist, so you've got to water this every day. You've got to look after it like a plant. Best place to keep it is where you keep your plants. If you're watering your plants, you water this. I also keep plant pots on top, so I water the plants and the water goes through to the worm farm. If you're not doing the thing with the plants on top, you need to cut a piece of cardboard to the shape of this and put it on top and keep it moist. And that way you can keep this in a good shape, because it needs to stay moist. But it shouldn't be so wet that if you squeeze it, it's dripping water. It should just be moist. There's a whole lot of problems you can have, and I'll make a video on what happens if you have problems. But you just need to know what to feed them. A lot of people think you can give them lots of food scraps. That's just going to get mouldy. It's going to create fungi. It's going to attract flies and maggots and things like that. So you don't want to give much food scraps. You want to give the right food scraps and in the right quantities. Anything you put in there should be gone in a week. So the worms will tell you if you're putting the wrong thing, because in a week if it's still there, you've done wrong. If you get flies and maggots, you've done wrong. The easiest way to do it correctly is to only give manure, but if you want to give food scraps, you need to give fruits and no root vegetables. Basically these guys are vegan, and they're raw foodists, and they're gluten-free, and they're very fussy. And you're going to learn yourself through mistakes what they like, but I try to just feed these guys fruits and vegetables and no root vegetables. And their favourite is the skin of watermelon. I buy watermelons for my worms, not for me. And then when you put the feed in here, you have to remove the manure, put the feed underneath and cover it. Okay, so that the flies can't lay eggs. And if you every time put the food in a different space, go around in a circle, and when you get back to the first one in a week, there should be nothing there. So you just keep doing that. But generally, most people's problems are from feeding too much food scraps. So your best thing is to buy a truckload of manure and use that over time.
Yeah.
If you're going on the option to feed food scraps and you want to do it perfectly to get the maximum increase in worms, then you want to feed the food scraps every day. And you need to feed the right amount every day. And you will learn that, but really, it should be very little. People think that they eat their body weight a day, but they don't, especially when there's all this manure. So you just put a little bit in every day, or a little bit more in once a week. And as I say, always go with less, and you can always slowly increase it. So just one point is, everyone who buys worms from me wants to start off with a bathtub because they've heard that's the best way to do it. But you don't have enough worms in there. Worms are tiny, a bathtub's big, and you want them to mate, okay? So you want them to mate, you're going to get them in a small container, so they're going to mate and lay loads of eggs, and then you're going to increase the amount of worms, and you're going to end up with, divide it in 2 months into 2 worm farms. And then you're going to increase again, and in 2 more months, you're going to have more worms, and then you can put these into bigger buckets. And over time, you can go to bigger containers. But don't put all your worms in one bathtub and lose them all. Start small and gradually get bigger worm farms. You're not going to harvest much castings or worm extract in this small one, but you've only bought 600 worms, and you've got to start somewhere. I started with 600 worms 4 years ago, and now I sell these every week. And you can also do that, but don't take my customers. Thank you for watching my video. If you want to buy any worms, I can post them to anywhere in Portugal, and hopefully you have a successful worm farm. Also, I've got a series on worm farming where you can learn more about different worm farming methods, why we keep them, how to use it, how to make bigger worm farms, and it's a never-ending topic. So I'll try and make as many videos as possible, so please remember to subscribe.